encounter with Dorothy, DL has caught that spark, and in this book, she passes it on. Lent 2022, Robert Ellsberg. Robert Ellsberg is publisher of Orbis Books, former managing editor of The Catholic Worker, and editor of 5 volumes of Dorothy Day's writings, including her diaries and her selected letters. Introduction. Writing a book is hard because you are giving yourself away. But if you love, you want to give yourself. Dorothy Day, The Long Loneliness. In 2015, Pope Francis visited the United States and gave a historic address to the members of Congress. When he expressed gratitude about being invited to speak in the land of the free and the home of the brave, he received a standing ovation from the crowd of politicians and journalists in Washington, D.C. Francis, originally from Argentina, spoke about the spiritual and moral legacy of the United States and the need for work to continue in the areas of poverty, the abolition of the death penalty, and addressing the global refugee crisis, among other issues. He also highlighted 4 exemplars from U.S. history, great people of faith who moved America's moral and social imagination forward in distinct ways. As Pope Francis talked about Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., and Thomas Merton, heads nodded around the room, all familiar names in the story of America that we tell ourselves. Then he mentioned Dorothy Day, and journalists began frantically typing into search engines on their smartphones and computers, all asking the same question: who the heck is Dorothy Day? Kate Hennessy, Dorothy Day's granddaughter, laughs as she tells this beloved story. In comparison with the 3 men Francis mentioned, Dorothy Day is the least well-known figure in popular culture. Yet to Francis and to many other people, both Catholic and non-Catholic, Dorothy Day is one of the most important figures in the American 20th century. When she died over 40 years ago in 1980, the news made the front page of the New York Times. Her obituary described her legacy of engaging Catholics and people of faith in the work of social justice through the newspapers she founded, her houses of hospitality, and her luminous personality. It was all written about breathlessly: her communist background, her love of the poor, and her desire to see people of faith at the forefront of social justice issues. From the obituary, it was clear she was the kind of paradox that intrigues the world. Famously leftist in her ideals, she also loved the traditions and liturgy of Roman Catholicism. When she publicly clashed with church authority figures throughout her life, people near her remained mystified that she wasn't denounced or excommunicated. Perhaps, mused the writer of her New York Times obituary, it was because the cardinals themselves suspected they might be dealing with a saint. A stubborn, smiling, unruly saint who never stopped seeing the face of Christ in the faces of the poor around her, and anyone she came into contact with she invited to do the same. 40 years after her death, her vision for what it looks like to be a person of faith in tumultuous times is more relevant than ever. Dorothy Day was a trailblazer, a curmudgeon, deeply radical, and deeply drawn to religious and cultural traditions. In the U.S. halls of power, Pope Francis commended her as an exemplary American, one to strive to be like. He said this while surely knowing Dorothy Day was once considered a person of interest by the FBI, complete with extensive file on her, knowing she publicly encouraged people to resist conscription into any war effort, knowing she was arrested numerous times in her life, and that she was a proud federal tax resistor. The irony of Pope Francis praising Dorothy Day, a thorn in the side of the U.S. government, not despite her faith but precisely because of it, is not lost on me. As I watched the Pope speak to Congress on the screen, I wondered if the people gathered that day knew the significance of Dorothy Day being upheld as an American saint, someone who shines a light on the way forward in the United States. She is and was a complex woman, and even more importantly, if even a few of us started to live our lives more like her, the disruption to society would be immediate and overwhelming. The world would turn...